A lot of questions are going on with the Cincinnati Bengals right now. Are they an underrated team? Are they an overrated team? Where do they stand? What's the situation with Joe Burrow? Is he going to be over or underhyped this season? So many questions, only a few answers. So I brought one of the best to bring the answers, and we're going to talk about that right after this. Real quick, guys, before the video starts, I want to make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, ding that notification bell so you can be notified. I got a ton of AFC North training camp coverage coming up. So if this is what you like, please get anchored down here, hit that like button, subscribe, and notify so you don't miss a single drip of content. Now back to the video. As I said earlier, there's a ton of questions about the Cincinnati Bengals, and I think there's only one man appropriate to bring on to answer these questions. He's a guy I do a show with every Monday on the AFC North Talk YouTube channel. We go live every Monday. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for Mr. Ace Boogie. Ace, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks, Quincy. I appreciate you having me on, and I'm definitely loving being on the channel and ready to talk some Bengals.
Definitely, man. Definitely. One of the questions that I have, and I think a lot of people have about the Bengals, and I think it all starts with Joe Burrow, and with camp starting, with it being limited, and with everything kind of being on this weird schedule, I wanted to know, just from your perspective, how are things looking in Cincinnati for one Joseph Burrow?
I think right now it's actually looking pretty good from all indications that I've heard from tweets on Twitter and indications from players and things of that nature. Everything has been good. A lot of players have actually said that they forget that Joe Burrow's a rookie because of how intelligent he is when it comes to coming to the line and, making his check downs and also making reads on the defense and adjustments. And from what I've heard, he's been one of a kind. I've also heard from Dave Lapham that the velocity that he's throwing on the ball is a catchable ball that isn't too hard, that isn't breaking receivers' fingers, and he's putting it right on them. And I've heard that he's been, very accurate. He was even compared to Kenny Anderson, which is a heap of praise. But from what I've seen, it's definitely been a period where he's kind of come in and fit right in and really taken off. And it seems that he's got some chemistry, some early chemistry with Tyler Boyd, from what I've heard. He also got to throw with AJ Green. John Ross was out. He actually went to deal with his son. He had a family issue. His son and the mother of the child contracted COVID. So he's out, but I'm not really worried about that because during this whole pandemic and this offseason, Joe Burrow was in California. John Ross was in California. They worked out plenty of times together. So I don't think that there's going to be any indication that they don't have any kind of chemistry there because they were able to get that prior work in. But all indications of Joe Burrow have been good.
My one question with Joe Burrow, as far as like where Bengals fans see him his rookie year, is kind of where on that spectrum from Andy Dalton to, a top tier level Carson Palmer do you guys see him playing at in his rookie year? We know the potential is insane, but like in his rookie year, what kind of level of player are you guys kind of expecting for him?
Well, so I think with him coming in as a rookie in these circumstances, the expectations aren't as high. Carson Palmer got to actually sit his rookie year, so he got to sit behind a guy like John Kitna. They're going to bring Joe Burrow in immediately. He's going to start from day one. I think, though, when you look at this situation, it actually does parallel to Andy Dalton because although there wasn't a pandemic going on in 2011, there was a lockout, which kind of, in a sense, gave the same circumstances. Guys weren't able to meet up, and they had to do things outside of the NFL regulation in order to get adjusted. But I also think that where Bengals fans think where Joe Burrow is going to be is actually slightly over where Andy Dalton was because he came in with similar circumstances. But we expect Joe Burrow to be a much better player. I think that he is going to also be a more accurate thrower of the ball. And the fact that they have more tools there and they also win in free agency and spend some money on defense, that's going to help him. But the equalizer and what's really going to determine that is how good this offensive line can be. They kind of got after him a couple of days ago at training camp in terms of the defensive line and the defense. But I think our expectations are that he will have a very good rookie year, better than Andy Dalton. That's not really saying much. Like Andy Dalton kind of took the league by storm, and most people didn't expect him to do that. I always kind of attributed that to how good AJ Green was because he bailed him out a lot that year. But I don't think it would be a shock to say that he would have a better rookie season than Andy Dalton in terms of stats wise. Now, wins wise, that could be where it kind of gets a little muddy. I don't think that they expect him to go 9-7, I believe, like Andy Dalton did that year. So I think from a statistics standpoint, we actually expect him to do better, but we're not expecting him to come in and break the rookie touchdown record or passing record or anything like that. But we do expect him to play better than Andy Dalton did in 2011.
Now that you brought up an interesting point there with the offensive line, and I know that you guys got Jonah Williams back, there's some reason to be optimistic about the offensive line. Where are you guys at right now with that offensive line? How is that looking at camp? Is that going to be much improved from last year?
I think the bar was pretty low for last year. However, I think it's still a work in progress. I'm not as high as some others are on the offensive line simply just because Jonah is back. That is going to be a huge asset for us because left tackle last year was an absolute disaster. For those who don't know, Cordy Glenn essentially claimed that he sustained an injury during preseason, didn't return until week 12, and there was some back and forth between players and coaches. It got really bad. There were shouting matches that happened between him and the offensive line coach. And essentially what Cordy Glenn tried to do is essentially get paid for not doing anything. Once the Bengals started to play bad, he decided to kind of milk an injury and he got cut. And surprisingly, no one has picked him up. So it really must have put a bad name on him going into that. But at this point, you also have to look at the fact that the Bengals, it was really bad at the left tackle position last year. Like we had guys that hadn't played in 2 years and, essentially were guards playing out of position. So Jonah is going to be huge. However, I think that they're depending too much on guys that are young and inexperienced. So we drafted Michael Jordan last year. He really got some decent snaps, but he really wasn't that guy. He's a guy that they're hoping has a ton of potential. And Jim Turner is really just trying to progress that group. He really likes the big guards. And it makes me cringe when I hear people that aren't familiar with the offensive line that think that Billy Price is starting. Billy Price is not starting. Billy Price is essentially right now just trying to keep a roster spot, which will likely happen because if they cut him, it's more damage to cut him than to keep him there. So Billy Price, however, is rejuvenated. He is a guy that knows he's on the hot seat. So he's doing whatever he can to try to make it there. But you're going to see Michael Jordan at left guard. You're going to see Jonah Williams at left tackle. Trey Hopkins is probably, if you're talking about specifically last year, he's definitely our best offensive lineman. He's the center, so we look for him to build upon that. And then you look at the right guard, which is somewhat of a question mark because they moved away from a guy that they brought in from the Bills last year. They cut him as a free agent, and then they brought in Xavier Su'a-Filo. So they went the free agent route again. I'm not like Xavier Su'a-Filo. He came from the Cowboys, but he was a reserve for the Cowboys, so he's still a question mark. And then you have the aforementioned Bobby Hart, which is a hot rod, a lightning rod for the Bengals fan base. He's a decent tackle. He's not a starter quality kind of tackle from our estimations. And so a lot of people wanted us to actually upgrade that right tackle, possibly in free agency. Other than paying that money to Wayne, some of our fans wanted us to actually go out and try to do what the Browns did, which is sign a quality right tackle, but they decided not to do that. But there is some hope in the wings, and right now it's going to start off as Bobby Hart, but he could be supplanted by Fred Johnson, which was a guy that really came on for us. And last year was really a learning, I think, year for us from the offensive lineman standpoint. So we were able to find Fred Johnson in a year where we had Cordy Glenn drama at left tackle, and we actually picked up Fred Johnson. I want to say it was a little bit around like week 10, week 9. So we were able to get him, and he actually played pretty good at left tackle, right tackle, or wherever we played him at. So I think that this is an improved unit based off of last year, just because last year was so bad and the group was decimated, but it's still a work in progress. This still isn't by any means a unit that makes you comfortable with putting a top number 1 pick like Joe Burrow behind it.
Definitely. You mentioned Xavier Su'a-Filo, but also I wanted to talk about some of the guys that you've brought in. I mean, there is Trey Waynes, who unfortunately got injured. DJ Reader is a big part of what you guys brought in. Mike Daniels is a guy I've been talking about on this channel. Saw a video of him going against Xavier Su'a-Filo, and he looked pretty good. So, I'm interested to see, how are those additions? The Bengals get this rap for being cheap and not spending money, but they actually spent a decent penny out there to get some veterans in there. How are those pieces looking like they're panning out?
Well, the Trey Wayne situation obviously isn't the best, and some people look at it and compare it to one of the reasons that the Bengals really stopped spending in free agency, and that was when the Bengals went out in the early 2000s or the mid 2000s and went out and signed Antonio Bryant. The difference between that situation and this situation was the Bengals somehow cleared Antonio Bryant, and then as soon as they signed him, he was essentially hurt with a knee injury. They had to pay him that guaranteed money, even though he couldn't even play. So it was a totally different situation. In this situation, Trey Waynes, he signed his contract, was in training camp, and just happened to have a pec injury. So from that standpoint, it's a huge loss for the Bengals. Likely, I'm still sitting on the prediction that I think that they'll keep him out this year. There's a chance he could return, but when you move from that, the biggest home run, honestly, like a lot of Bengals fans didn't. It's crazy to say, but a lot of Bengals fans weren't really big fans of the Trey Wayne signing, but all of us love the DJ Reader signing, and it's given all indications so far that DJ Reader is going to be a guy that's going to come in, work his butt off, be a leader in that locker room, and he's a quality guy off the field. He was one of the guys that I hoped to get an interview with, and I did some research on him, and I was really just impressed with DJ Reader, the person. This is a guy that lost his father in high school and created a foundation, and at one point was thinking about, with everything going on with his family, at one point in college thought about not playing football. He actually sat out for a couple games, came back, had a great year, has gotten into the NFL, has really blossomed, and this is going to be a team that's going to put him next to Geno Atkins, which is a talent next to Geno Atkins we have never had. And then you also talk about Mike Daniels. You add that to the list. It's just crazy. And Mike Daniels was a bonus, I think, at this point. You've never seen the Bengals add in quality guys like that. But then you also talk about Von Bell. That was another one when everyone thought the Bengals were pretty much done after they went and got Bynes, they went and got Reader, they went and got Waynes. Everyone was like, okay, they got Suafilo, we're pretty much done. Then out of nowhere, they get Von Bell, who turned down a contract with the New Orleans Saints. And somehow the Bengals ended up signing him for less money than that. And he actually wanted to go back to Ohio. So I think the one thing that has remained the constant is the Bengals have brought in these guys that have looked very good so far outside of the Trey Wayne situation, which that's still a wait and see kind of thing. But we're expecting him to be a better tackling Drake Kirkpatrick, which really isn't that hard to do because Drake Kirkpatrick, sorry, Dre, is not a great tackler. So from that standpoint, it's been good. They also added in Josh Bynes. Josh Bynes is fitting in very well. He's going to be a guy that's going to come in and just try to lead this linebacker unit that is extremely young with Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson and Marcus Bailey. There's a lot of young guys there, Akeem Davis-Gaither. So the new guys are really fitting in well. They bought into the system here, and a lot of them were either recruited by players on the Bengals or they had very good interactions with the coaching staff. So I have to give Zach and those guys credit. Also have to give the players credit. I know Geno Atkins himself was actively recruiting Mike Daniels throughout this offseason. And I know that Sam Hubbard, who has recently joined the Bengals, it's almost seeming like we're becoming, Ohio State pro because we have all of these Ohio State players that play with each other. When you talk about Joe Burrow, Billy Price, Sam Hubbard, Von Bell, we're bringing them all back together. So Sam Hubbard has done a great job of he recruited Joe Burrow, essentially let him know the ins and outs of Cincinnati. And then he's also recruited other players. So they're in a situation where these are guys that they've actually played with before and they're interacting well. And from all indications of what we've seen, everything has been going good so far.
The constant fight in the state of Ohio for the battle of the city of Columbus goes on between the two football teams that we have here. The last thing I want to get about this team is kind of what's going on with AJ Green. I know he hasn't really practiced that much, but it seems like from all indications from the coaching staff, he's healthy. Just what are you guys expecting from AJ Green coming off of a year where he couldn't play last year? What kind of impact are you expecting him to have? Is he still going to be, the customary top 10 receiver he's been throughout his career?
Yeah, I think when you look at AJ Green, going back to last year before he sustained the injury, he looked amazing. AJ has always been that guy when you're watching training camps, when you're perusing Twitter to see what's going on, it's always like, oh my God, AJ Green looks amazing today. He's always going to have, popping plays that he makes, jump balls, one-handed catches. He's still that guy. From all indications from what I've seen, they said that he looked very fluid to start training camp. He started off out there. He tweaked his hamstring. And so as a precaution, just to keep him from possibly aggravating an injury or anything like that, they pulled him from training camp. So right now he's just resting. They gave him the day off as of yesterday. He probably will come back. Joe Burrow was actually asked about it, and he said that we don't need those guys right now. We need them. And in addition to AJ Green, Sean Williams, and some other guys got hurt, he said that we need those guys as soon as we're getting ready to start out week 1. So right now it's just a precaution thing. I think back to the Bengals when they were on Hard Knocks, and Harrison was like hitting AJ, and Jay Gruden said, don't touch the merchandise, because AJ Green is the merchandise. You can't mess with him. So I'm not mad that they're giving him a rest and stuff like that, but I fully expect AJ Green to be AJ Green. He's a totally consistent and humble guy. And although he is humble, you know, I was able to listen to an interview that he did as soon as he signed the franchise tag, right? And that's another reason why they don't want to have any bad blood with him, because the two sides were able to understand the circumstances with COVID. They understand that they want to get an extension done after this season. So they don't want to put AJ in a situation where he could potentially mess up that money. But listening to him, of course, the reporters asked him, you know, we're hearing that a lot of people aren't considering you a top 5 receiver, top 10. And he was like, I hear them. And as soon as I get on the field, I'm going to prove them wrong. And AJ's never been a guy with a big ego. He's the consummate professional. But when he hears people like that, you might end up, you know, getting a big year for him. I would expect a really big year for him, because the last time that I remember this was the season, I believe it was 2016. He kind of was not being talked about as a top 5 receiver, and he just went out against Revis, and that was like the nail on the coffin for Darrelle Revis. He went out and had like 200 yards on Darrelle Revis. And the other thing that you have to account for is AJ Green has been putting up these great numbers, and we can finally say it now because we finally have moved on from Andy Dalton. But it was with Andy Dalton. These weren't great passes. Some of them were underthrown 95% of the time. Now he's actually going to be able to play with a better quarterback. So we've always wondered what AJ Green would look like with a better quarterback. And I think with Joe Burrow in there, even as a rookie, I think he's still going to be a better quarterback. And I don't want to throw anybody under the bus or anything like that. But from sources that I talked to with AJ last year, AJ could have played at some point. It really wasn't worth risking it, but he really had moved on from wanting to play with Andy Dalton. So I don't want to start too much drama, but I was able to confirm that, you know, he was ready for a change at quarterback.
So he might be healthier than he's ever been. He might be more ready and more hungry than he's ever been. He might have the best quarterback play of his entire career. Anybody who is sleeping on that, I think, is making a grave mistake. I think the Bengals are actually one of the more interesting and underrated and under talked about at the very least teams in the NFL. And I want to know from you, somebody who covers the Bengals, is deep in, has their ear down to the ground with everything going with the Bengals. What do you think is going to be the thing that surprises people the most about the 2020 Cincinnati Bengals?
I think the thing that will surprise people the most is how good they will be potentially offensively. I don't think most people expect them to really do much. And I also think that they are going to win more games than people expect. But I think the offense is what's really going to shock people, because a lot of people didn't realize how many injuries they had on the offensive line. And even in the receiver room, they really lost a lot of those guys last year. So I think what's going to surprise a lot of people is once Joe Burrow gets on the field with these weapons, how, you know, potent that they're going to be, especially with Joe Mixon. If this offensive line can get better than it was last season, I think you'll see this offense really take over. The defense, though, I think will also, I think most people, when they think about the Bengals, they usually have this perception that the Bengals have a good defense. They're solid defense. But honestly, when you look at the stats, the past couple of years, they really haven't been that unit that they were when Mike Zimmer was here. I really think that Lou Anarumo, and I'm not in the majority here, but I really liked what he did because he kind of experimented with a lot of different looks. And I think that next year, with all the adjustments that they've made, the free agents that they brought in, I think that they will be improved on defense. But I think the most shocking thing will be the offense.
All right, well, there you have it. That's a nice little preview of what's gone on so far in the Bengals camp with New Stripe City, a.k.a. Ace Boogie on Twitter. Make sure you follow him and subscribe to his YouTube channel, New Stripe City. Ace, you have anything else you want to add?
No, man, I'm just looking forward to the season. Of course, I'm also looking forward to seeing what the Browns can do this season. And it's just a really exciting time in the AFC North for anybody except, of course, the Squealers. But, when you have all of these Heisman winning quarterbacks, I think the future is bright in the AFC North.
Definitely super bright. And again, if you want to hear more interaction between me and Ace, or just hear more of Ace, period, we have a fantastic live stream that we do on Monday. So again, if you want to check us out there, please subscribe to the AFC North Talk YouTube channel. Link's going to be in the description. I want to make sure it's easy for you guys to find. But again, Ace, thank you for coming along. Thank you for having this chat. And again, guys, have a great day. Have a good night.